Um, let me start with a confession that seems more than appropriate, given some of the people I've seen walking around here. Number one, first of all, I'm freezing. I'm from San Diego, California, and to tell you how tough this has been for me, a couple of days ago, I was swimming in an outdoor pool. And here, in this hotel, I've had to swim in an indoor pool. I mean, okay, now, but wait, the things I have to confess get worse as you go. I understand that's how it is in a confession booth too. You know, you save the tough stuff for last. So, second is I'm not even a Christian. No, I'm not a Christian, and I'm so stay calm. Okay, I don't want to get booed off the stage or anything. But the most surprising thing about me being here is I'm not even a conservative. Think about that. So I wonder how many Jewish liberals from California you've had speak to your group before. Oh dear. So why am I here? In fact, let's go beyond that. Let's ask, why does Tucker Carlson keep having me on his show? Why does Glenn Beck invite me to be on his show? Why does Breitbart call me up every week? Including the owner of Breitbart, and the editor-in-chief. Why did they include me in a town hall with my friend Ann Coulter, of all people? Peter Schweitzer, who has become a very good friend. He's the guy who wrote Clinton Cash, a well-known conservative. Why am I embedded? Why is my life embedded now among conservative people who have different agendas, but still, why? Why is this happening? Well, this brings me to the three big issues that I'm going to discuss with you, and all of which I think you'll find very disturbing, all of which are affecting your lives right now, whether you know it or not, and are affecting your children's lives as well. I'm the father of 5. And there's nothing more important to me in my life than my children. Nothing. And one of the reasons that I'm so disturbed about what I've discovered over the last 6+ years in my research is because not only are these phenomena affecting us as adults, but I think they're affecting our children, and I think they're affecting our children even more than they're impacting us. And the way it works when you're doing formal scientific studies is it's very hard to get permission to do studies with people under 18 in this country for good reason. But I can tell you for sure, no one's ever going to let me do research on manipulating 12-year-olds, with online materials. No one's ever going to let me do that research. In other words, all I've discovered with people 18 and over, and I know that what I've discovered is applicable to younger people and probably impacting them much more so than older people, because they're just immersed in a world of technology that we can't even really understand at this point. I remember when one of my daughters was about, I think, 13 or 14, I checked on her at night, as you sometimes do, and I noticed there were 5 electronic devices around her pillow. We're talking about a whole world, a different world in which our children are growing up, and the world in which they're going to be living in, we can't even imagine what that's going to be like, but I can tell you that technology is going to be surrounding them, probably even inside of them, under their skins, implanted in their brains. I mean, who knows? Okay, that brings me to the 3 big issues. One is surveillance, the second is censorship, and the third is manipulation. In my research, I study manipulation primarily, but I've written about all three of these issues. And if you want some general background here, I strongly recommend that you check out a new documentary film, which is called The Creepy Line. You can get information about it at thecreepyline.com, or you can look it up on iTunes, because it's available there now, and or also on Amazon. And if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can actually view the film for free. It's an hour and 20 minutes long. It's a full-length documentary, extremely well done, produced by Peter Schweitzer, who I mentioned earlier. So, I mean, there are some prominent conservatives involved, but it's a film that's not just for conservatives. It's a film, in my opinion, for everyone. So in a way, you could say the main reason that I'm here is because the issues that I'm going to tell you about should concern everyone. We should rise above our politics, and we should explore these issues, and we have to take action on these issues. Another way to put it is, okay, I'm not a conservative, but I love America. I love democracy. I think the free and fair election is a critical cornerstone of democracy. And basically, at this point in time, I can tell you that democracy is little more than an illusion in the United States and many other countries as well, because big tech companies now have the ability to determine the outcomes of elections without you having the slightest idea that they're doing so. And not just in the United States, but in countries around the world. Google and Facebook together serve about 2.5 billion people. That number will soon be over 4 billion. And they are impacting right now the moods, the attitudes, the behavior, the decision-making, the purchases, the votes of all of these people, 2.5 billion people around the world. Do you know how many times that people in the United States alone go to Google's homepage, to google.com? How many searches are done in the United States? Just in one day, more than 500 million searches a day are done in Google every day, just in the US. Now, worldwide, we're talking about massive numbers. Okay, that brings me to surveillance. Google, I've been lately calling GSA, or Google Surveillance and Advertising. I mean, you've heard of KFC, that's Kentucky Fried Chicken, right? Apple is Apple Computers, Inc. Sometimes in the name of the company, it tells you what the company does. With Google, we just call Google, and it sounds kind of cool and funny, and we don't really know what they do exactly. We think they're like a public librarian, and they just provide us with lots of free services. Okay, they're nothing like a public librarian. A public librarian doesn't track you, doesn't sell information about you. They just help you find information. That's not really what Google is doing. It's a game that they're playing, okay? Because if you had to give Google the name that it should have based on what it actually does, it should be called Google Surveillance and Advertising. And the same applies to Facebook. Because what does Google actually do? It actually is a surveillance company. So every single service that you use that Google provides, no matter what you think it's doing for you, it exists for only one purpose from a business perspective, and that is surveillance. That's the only purpose. The only reason they run a search engine is to collect information about where you search, what you search for. And your entire search history, going back to the first search you ever conducted, is stored permanently in their computers, and then they draw conclusions from that. They make models, they build models from that information. And believe me, where you search, that tells a lot about you. And then of course there are those friends of yours who once used your computer to visit some porn sites. Not you personally, of course. But the point is, a search history is a very rich treasure trove of information about people. Most of you, I don't even want a show of hands because it'll depress me, but most of the people in this room use Gmail. Gmail is Google's email service. Most of the people in the world use Gmail. Gmail's not an email service, it's a surveillance platform. That's all it is. It's just another way that Google collects information about you. All of your emails are stored permanently, even the emails that you didn't send, even the drafts, those crazy drafts you write sometimes to people and you say, oh, I better not send this, I'm not gonna send this, okay, and you never send it. Even that is stored and analyzed. And all of the incoming emails that you've received from anyone, those are stored and analyzed and monetized by Google. Now, we're talking about, a couple of things here, but it goes way, way beyond that. How about the most popular browser in the world? That's Chrome. Google invented Chrome because they weren't getting enough information. They were getting information if you used their search engine, right, google.com, but that didn't tell them where you went to when you weren't using your search engine. So they had to build a browser, Chrome, so they would know where you went to online when you weren't using their search engine. Well, now they have a full picture of what you do online through Chrome, but that wasn't enough. They wanted to know what you did when you weren't online. So they had to build an operating system which is called Android. Again, I'm not going to get a show of hands because it will just depress me, but most of the people in this room have mobile devices in their pockets or purses which use the Android operating system, which is not really an operating system, it's a surveillance platform. It tracks every single thing you do online or offline, so even if you disconnect from your mobile provider, even if you pull out your SIM card, as long as your phone is still on, it still has power, the Android operating system is recording every single thing you do and every single place you go. Even if you turn off the geo-tracking, it's still tracking every single place you go. And the moment you reconnect to your mobile service, guess what it does? It uploads all that information it's been collecting while it was offline. And if you've not seen this particular video, I strongly recommend you look up the segment that Tucker Carlson did on this topic, because he actually shows you, with equipment, he shows you exactly what that phone does once it reconnects to the internet, and he shows you it's just sending all that information up instantly to where? To Google. Now, I've only mentioned, I think, four different methods that Google uses for surveillance. Do you know how many platforms Google is using for surveillance purposes? More than 200. More than 200 platforms, the vast majority of which you're completely unaware of. According to Google's terms of service, they have the right to track you when you're using any Google type of service, whether you know you are using a Google service or not. And the fact is, millions of websites embed what's called Google Analytics, so they can keep track of who visits their website. It kind of measures the traffic to websites, and it's free, right? Everything is free. So millions of websites use this, and guess what? When you visit any of these millions of websites, Google is tracking you. Every single thing you do on that website is tracked by Google. Google's reach is utterly, it's beyond belief. Yahoo is now drawing most of its search results from Google. Some of you have iPhones, I know, and some of you use Siri, which you should not use. Okay? You should deactivate Siri. iPhone is a good, secure phone, but you should deactivate Siri. But the point is, where do you think where do you think Siri gets its answers from? Anyone ever think about that? Siri gives you some pretty good answers to questions. How can it do that? It has to be drawing from a very rich, an incredibly rich source of accurate information. Where do you think it's getting it from? Google. So Google is everywhere, okay? And again, we're talking about more than 200 different tracking methods that you're just, generally speaking, unaware of. If you are, say, in your 30s, late 30s, something like that, Google has collected at this point the equivalent of more than, and I'm not kidding you, more than 3 million pages of information about you. See, you don't think about it. You're just giving it a little trickle of information each day, you know, when you do another search. A little trickle, tiny little trickle. You don't think about it. But that's how it adds up. And, you know, even if somehow or other we got them to give up all that information, which they'll never do, but even if somehow we did, it wouldn't matter, because that's not where the real value lies. That's information they've already gotten. That's information they've used to build increasingly powerful predictive models of you. And they don't hide this, because they say that their goal is to answer your questions even before you ask them, to anticipate your needs moment to moment in time throughout the day. You do that by building predictive models. You do that based on people's search histories, emails, et cetera, all this massive amount of information. Now, when we add Facebook into the mix, that's kind of a completely different kind of tool, but there, of course, you're voluntarily typing in information about who you are and what you like and what you dislike and what you're doing every day, moment by moment by moment. So Facebook collects a massive amount of information, but at least with Facebook, to some extent, you can see that they're collecting it, right? It's kind of a little bit more out in the open than Google is. Google is definitely not. Some of you may have read, for example, last week a story, a scandal. There's scandals almost every day with these companies, but a scandal about a company that Google bought called Nest. Oh, little footnote here. Google, on average, buys a new company once a week. And they don't buy a company unless it gives them another source of information about people. So a couple of years ago, they bought Nest, which made smart thermostats. Why would they do that? I mean, it's obvious why they bought YouTube, because that gives them tremendous information about your tastes and your wants and your needs, obviously, based on the videos that you watch. Why did they buy Nest? Well, because it turns out that really smart thermostats that have a computer built into them, they provide a lot of data about what's happening in your house. When you're home, when you're not home, when you go to sleep, when you wake up, okay? Well, the scandal last week was that someone like me, that's what I do, someone like me discovered that since Google bought the Nest company, the devices that they've been selling have built-in microphones. And so when this was revealed last week, Google said, oh, well, yeah, but we don't use them. And how would you know that? And how would you know that? And how would you know that? Come on. Now, the surveillance is getting crazier now with the introduction of personal assistants, not just the ones on your phone like Siri, but the Google Home device, which they're trying now to get people to install in every single room in their house. Or Amazon Alexa. When one of my sons gave an Alexa device to my eldest son for his birthday, I made him throw that right in the garbage, and he did. And I'm proud of him for that. The point is, if you have devices like this in your home, throw them away. I don't care how convenient they make things for you, throw them away. Because you know what? They're listening to you all the time. They're transmitting all the time. Okay? We've actually figured out now how to track and understand what it is they're transmitting back to these companies. And I'll say a little bit more about that later, but the point is, these are surveillance devices. They're not convenience devices that help you through your day. They're surveillance devices. Okay, you've got to look at these things for what they really are from a business perspective. Okay, GSA, Google Surveillance, and A is for advertising, because that's where they get their money. The surveillance is where they get their data, and they get the money, most of the money they receive from advertising. So more than 90% of the revenue that comes into Google and Facebook comes from advertising, meaning they're taking all this information from all their surveillance platforms and they're monetizing it. They're leveraging it in various ways, all kinds of ways. They try to come up with new ways every day, obviously. Google now brings in more than $100 billion a year in revenue from advertising. Google isn't Google, Google is GSA. Surveillance, that's what they do. Advertising, that's how they make money. That's what this company is. Now, the surveillance goes beyond Google and Facebook, but those are the biggest threats to us. And, why is surveillance such a threat? Because, often when I say this to people, people kind of just shrug their shoulders and say, I have nothing to hide. Okay, I'm sorry, but that is one of the most naive statements I've ever heard. Because, number one, we all have things to hide, okay? Go ahead, deny it. We all have things to hide, but it doesn't even matter anymore whether you have things to hide. It doesn't matter how exemplary you live your life, because the fact is, remember those predictive models? Even if you have nothing to hide, those predictive models are giving these companies more and more power over your life. So even if you have nothing to hide, do you really want a company to have that kind of power, to know more about you than you do and to be able to predict your every move moment to moment in time? Censorship. Here's another problem. Now, if you really want to start to look at this in detail, read my essay that I wrote for U.S. News and World Report. It is called The New Censorship. Very easy to find online. It will scare the heck out of you. It would take me at least another hour to go through the various points that I discuss in that article. In that article, I look at some of Google's blacklists. I look at 9 of them. And Google maintains blacklists. When you hear a statement from Google, like Google's CEO who testified before Congress in December, and by the way, my research was mentioned there, my name was mentioned several times, even the opening statement of the chair of the House Judiciary Committee actually mentioned me and described my work in some detail, which I thought was amazing. But the point is that when you hear someone from Google say, we don't manipulate elections, we never re-rank anybody, we don't manipulate our algorithm to favor one political candidate or party. When you hear someone from Google saying that, and very often you hear it over and over and over again, the same statements for years and years and years that Google releases to the public to defend themselves when they're accused of doing these things. You know what? You're smart people, and you are learning something right now. They don't have to change their algorithm. All they have to do is add a couple more things to their blacklists, because their algorithm is built so that it's always checking blacklists. Blacklists say, this particular person, under Europe's right to be forgotten law, we have to forget that person, so that person's name gets on a blacklist. The algorithm checks before it shows you information about that person, and if it's on the blacklist, the information is gone, you don't see it. So in other words, a lot of what they show you or don't show you has to do with what's on their blacklists. And they don't publish their blacklists. You don't know what's on them. You don't know which organization is on the blacklists at any point in time, which websites, which people, which companies. You don't know. But Google doesn't have to change their algorithm at all. So they fool us when they make these statements. They fool us because they don't tell us anything about the blacklists. The blacklists are the key to understanding how it is they suppress information. Now, this applies to Facebook as well, with the news feeds that they show. Anything that either company shows you, they're doing 2 things. They're filtering and they're ordering. What does filtering mean? Filtering means there's a lot of information out there, right? Think about it. Think of how many, there are billions of web pages, right? Thousands of news sources. Filtering means they decide what you're going to see or not see. What you're going to see or not see. Now, if they decide you're not going to see something, how would you know that? You would never know that. You'd have absolutely no way of knowing that. So the power of filtering gives them the power to suppress. It gives them the power to censor. And so here's another kind of clue as to why I'm here and why conservatives suddenly have taken a great interest in my research, because conservatives, rightly so, feel that maybe their presence on the internet has been suppressed. They feel sometimes that they've been censored. They feel, like Ann Coulter, that sometimes when they send out a message to their thousands or millions, she has millions of followers on Twitter, they feel like they're getting suppressed and all of their followers aren't getting their messages. That's called shadow banning. Well, again, these companies have the power to make these decisions about what you see and don't see. There was a whistleblower after the 2016 election who came forward from Facebook who said that he was on a team, and I met one of the people in New York who was on that team. He was on a team of young people from mainly liberal schools in the Northeast, like the schools I went to. And that team, they were curators for Facebook news stories. And he said, and it was our job to pull stories that we didn't like, and generally speaking, we pulled conservative stories. And now and then we'd insert stories that we thought were really cool, and of course those tended to be liberal stories. So again, that's a kind of censorship that's operating regarding the news that people see or don't see. So you've got filtering, which never stops, and is entirely in the hands of a very small number of companies and a very small number of executives, and not just for us in the US, but for people around the world. Same companies, same executives making those decisions. What you see and what you don't see. And the other thing they do is ordering. And this is something I've studied in tremendous detail, and the results are absolutely astonishing. But the fact is, when you do a search on Google, they show you a list, right? People in my profession have been studying list effects for more than 100 years. We've known, for example, if something's at the top of a list, it's easier to remember, okay? Some of you might remember this from a college course or high school course you've had. That's called the primacy effect, and it's part of the serial position effect and so on. There are lots of list effects that people have studied. Well, it turns out that search results, there's a list, right, have a bigger impact on people's thinking and opinions than any list ever discovered, ever, in more than 100 years of behavioral research. There's some very peculiar things about search results that make us believe that what's at the top is best and what's at the top is truest. Now, I started getting interested in that issue in late 2012. I was looking at some of the new business studies that have been done because, business people study search results because they know if, they're looking for ways to push their company up another notch higher, because if you push it up higher, you make more money. And if you're too low, you not only might lose money, you might go out of business. And if you're not on the first page of search results, you don't exist. So, and you're in deep trouble. So I was looking at studies in late 2012, about purchases related to search results, and I found, wow, these high-ranking results, people really believe those are the best. They really like those high-ranking results. And I asked a question. I wondered, well, would that affect maybe not just purchases and people's clicks, but could that affect people's opinions? People like those high-ranking results so much that 50% of all clicks go to the top 2 results, and 95% of all clicks go to the first page of search results. That's how much power these lists have over our behavior. But I asked, what if in an election, what if Google was showing you search results that favored one candidate or another? In other words, what if in 2016, when you did a search on anything related to the election, anything at all, immigration, the wall, abortion, anything you can think of, what if they showed you near the top, they took you to websites that made Hillary Clinton look a lot better than Donald Trump? What would happen if in an election search results favor one candidate over another? So early 2013, I did the first of many, many experiments I've conducted on this issue. I thought if I randomly assign people to different groups, and in one group, search results favor one candidate, in another group, they favor another candidate, and then I have a control group in which they're all mixed up, right? I thought that I could use search results to shift people's opinions about the candidates by, I thought, 2 or 3%. And I thought I could shift their voting preferences by 2 or 3%. Meaning, if I say, who are you going to vote for, before I let them do a search, I'm going to get probably 50-50 because I'm starting with undecided voters. And in fact, that's what I would get, so I always get in my experiments. But if I then let them do a search and I'm showing them biased searched results, basically I thought I could shift opinions and voting preferences by 2 or 3%. And I thought that's not much, but a lot of elections are quite close. So that could make a difference, right, in some elections. First experiment I ran, I got a shift of 48%. Well, yeah, that's kind of the sound I made because I thought that's impossible. That must be wrong. So I repeated the experiment with different people, different participants, and I got a shift of 63%. Yeah. Now, perhaps even more disturbing, I discovered that if I mask the effect a little bit, so in other words, if I have, Trump, well, this is long before that election. So, but let's just say if I had Trump, instead of having 10 Trump pages, Trump search results in a row, what if I did Trump, Clinton, Trump? See what I mean? What if I mask what I'm doing just to confuse people? And I found I could get 100% of the participants in my experiment to say, I didn't see any bias at all in these search results. In other words, I was learning over time that not only had I stumbled upon an extremely powerful tool of mind control, but I stumbled upon a tool that could be operated invisibly so that not a single person is aware that they're being manipulated or if they're seeing something that favors one perspective or another, or one candidate or another. At some point, I did a big national study in the US. They had more than 2,000 people in all 50 states. Got the same kind of findings, but now I had so many people in the study that I could look at demographic differences, and now another shocker. Some demographic groups are far more vulnerable to this kind of manipulation than other groups. And you know who turned out to be most vulnerable? Moderate Republicans. Do you know how big the shift was that I got in that study with moderate Republicans? 80%. In one search, after one search. What if you're showing people biased search results over a period of time, over a period of months, that favor one candidate or favor one party or favor one perspective, let's say, on pro-choice or pro-life? Wouldn't that shift the opinions of a lot of undecided people? Because it's undecided people who are the most vulnerable here, and that's who I always work with in my experiments. Couldn't that shift a lot of opinions without anyone knowing that this is occurring? So, now I had been using certain kinds of materials in these experiments, and I was using materials, real search results, real web pages from old elections. 2014, I went to India right in the middle of a real election, one of the largest, well, actually the largest democratic election ever held in history. And it got more than 2,000 people throughout India to participate in my experiment, and found that with real voters in the middle of a real election, I could still get shifts of 20% or more, and in some demographic groups, over 60%, with no one knowing. Do you know the percentage of people who had no idea they were seeing biased search results in my Big India study? 99.5%. No idea. Now, there are few people who can spot the bias, and here's another disturbing finding. The very few people who can see the bias or the favoritism in search results, they shift even farther in the direction of the bias. So being able to see the bias doesn't protect you from it. This effect I called SEME, S-E-M-E, which stands for Search Engine Manipulation Effect. That's what the head of the House Judiciary Committee was talking about at that hearing in December with the Google CEO. I published those results in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2015. That paper from the National Academy's website has since been accessed almost 200,000 times. For a scientific paper, that's almost unheard of. And because they publish in all the sciences, chemistry, physics, astronomy, biology, and it's extremely rare for any technical scientific paper to generate that kind of interest. So of course, we're now talking about the third topic, which means manipulation. You're surveilling, you're collecting massive amounts of information, you're suppressing, you're deciding what people see, what they don't see. That's the censorship issue, the big issue. And the third issue is what I discovered in these early experiments, and that is manipulation. You can use these tools that are surveillance tools to manipulate people's thinking without their knowing. And guess what? These big issues, these big problems are connected to each other. Because the more you know about people, the easier it is to manipulate them. And that's also something I've shown in my research. The more you know about people, the more easily you can give them material that they're going to believe automatically. You can send them sources, news sources that you know they trust, and easily shift their thinking or behavior or opinions without anyone knowing. 2015, I was approached by the Attorney General of Mississippi, who was in a big fight with Google, and he was concerned, could they manipulate, search results to affect him in his bid for re-election? And I said, yeah, very easily. I explained how, and he said, and then the two of us asked, really, how would we prove this? This led in 2016 to my first monitoring project, an election monitoring project, which I did secretly, which ran for almost 6 months before the 2016 election. That allowed me to collect search results on Google, Bing, and Yahoo. So I preserved more than 13,000 election-related searches and 87,000 web pages. Analyzed the data, found out that there was a significant pro-Hillary Clinton bias, and I supported Hillary Clinton. There was a significant pro-Hillary Clinton bias on Google search results, much less so on Bing and Yahoo. But Google, there was that bias. Enough, possibly, to have shifted 2 or 3 million votes nationwide. By how many votes did Hillary win the popular vote? Wasn't it about 2.8 million votes? Probably just a coincidence, but the point is, without the help of Google and probably some other tech companies, she would have gotten fewer votes. Now, I think in 2016, these companies held back, so I was determined to try to get some funding to set up a monitoring system for 2018. I did get funding, but more or less last minute. But within the next 2 weeks or so, you will see in the national news information about my 2018 monitoring project. So I haven't gone public with it yet, but again, that'll be in the national news very soon. Do you think I found any pro-democratic, pro-liberal bias maybe on Google? Do you know that if let's say I did, okay? Let's say I did. Do you know that if that level of bias, which I may or may not have found, had been operating for several months before the 2018 midterms, do you know how many votes, additional votes that could have given to Democratic candidates in various races around the country? If I really did that, it would have shifted upwards of 78.2 million votes with no one having the slightest idea that this was occurring. See, it's not just the manipulation that's the problem, it's the invisibility of it that's the problem. Well, since I did the SEAM research, since that time I've discovered, I think, at least 9 other online manipulation effects that are very much like SEAM. I'll just mention a couple very quickly. One is SSE, the search suggestion effect. You know when you start to type a search term and you get those search suggestions flashing at you? You think that's random? Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. And in fact, I've shown in experiments that just by manipulating search suggestions, I can turn a 50-50 split among undecided voters into a 90-10 split, with no one having the slightest idea that they have been manipulated. The answer bot effect, ABE, you know those boxes they're showing you more and more that are above the search results? Those impact people's opinions too, because people think they've gotten the answers, and people also think the same thing when they get an answer from Siri or they get an answer from Alexa. I have data now showing the impact that those answer boxes have on people's opinions. Basically, they boost SEAM by 10 to 30%. Now, answer boxes aren't as scary because you can see them at least, or you can hear the answer, but still, it's not what you think it is. It's not a public service, it's a manipulation. I published an article in January looking at Google's Go Vote reminder that they posted on Election Day, November 6th of 2018. Do you think Google would post a Go Vote reminder to everyone in the country if that was going to give more votes to Republicans? Of course not. 96% of donations that come from Google employees are given to Democrats. We know from recent leaks to Tucker Carlson to Breitbart, we know of leaks from internal emails and videos from Google that they're passionately liberal there in their thinking, and that they're determined to, quote unquote, spread their values, not just in the US, but worldwide. In the article I published in January, I showed that Go Vote reminder was not a public service. It was not a public service. It was a vote manipulation. At a minimum, it gave at least 800,000 additional votes to Democratic candidates around the country. And it could have given, if they were targeting it, if they suppressed it so that Republicans weren't seeing it, it could have given as many as 4.6 million votes to Democratic candidates around the country in different races. It was a manipulation. It's not a public service. Google operates at 2 levels. You know, the nice, sweet, kindly librarian level, everything's free and we love you level, that's up here. And then below the surface, we're looking at GSA. We're looking at a company that engages in widespread surveillance on a scale that's never been possible before in human history, that suppresses whatever they want to suppress at the moment. Maybe, yeah, they are suppressing a lot of conservative material, but who knows who they're going to suppress next week. You see, that's why I think everyone needs to rise above politics here. You can't have that much power in the hands of a company like this. And the manipulation part, that's what bothers me the most. And that's where I'm really putting most of my effort and time right now, is trying to figure these things out. I have to discover them, and then I have to study them, and then I have to quantify them, and it's tough. It's nerve-wracking sometimes. And the results so far, over and over again, have been disturbing and disturbing and then more disturbing. Okay, I have a few minutes left, and I want to focus on you and your families. What can be done here? Well, you know, at the institutional governmental level, maybe some regulation would help. Elizabeth Warren just yesterday published a big article proposing that we break up the big tech companies. It was just smoke and mirrors, in my opinion. It really would not end these problems that I just described to you. It wouldn't have any impact at all on these problems. In fact, I think if we look into it, we'll find that she gets a lot of money from Google and Facebook. That's my guess. So at the institutional level, yes, some things maybe need to be done, but you know what? Regulation, legislation will never, ever keep up with high tech. Never. Tech moves too fast. Regulation moves too slow. But still, okay, people are working on that. I'm working with people on those issues. Monitoring systems, like the ones I've set up, if those were set up worldwide, we could catch these companies as they are manipulating. We could catch those shenanigans. Okay, so right now I'm trying to find an additional $10 million to set up a large-scale monitoring system to keep an eye on a large scale nationwide, to keep an eye on the 2020 election. So if any of you want to write a check, 10 million, okay, we can stop these companies through monitoring because monitoring will allow us to catch them. And if they know they can be caught, they won't do these things. In fact, we could announce in advance what we're monitoring, and they won't even try. So I have a lot of faith in monitoring because technology keeps changing, and monitoring can change right along with it. That's fighting technology with technology. But in the meantime, there are things that we all can do to protect ourselves. I strongly recommend that you look up an article of mine online. It's a little out of date now, but I'm about to update it. It's called 7 Simple Steps Toward Online Privacy. 7 Simple Steps Toward Online Privacy. And I'm just going to give you a few of the steps right now that you should take, even if it's inconvenient. Okay, your privacy is at stake. The privacy of your family, your children is at stake. Number 1, if you use Gmail, stop. There are email services that protect your privacy. I use one called Proton Mail. It's at protonmail.com. A lot of people have been switching over to that. They operate out of Switzerland. They're subject to very strict Swiss privacy laws. They use end-to-end encryption. They do not track you, and they protect your privacy. It's just like the old days, which some of you here will remember, when you could write a letter, put a stamp on it, put it in a mailbox, and it gets to the other end, and no one sees what's in that letter until it reaches the person it's intended for. Remember those days? That's what Proton Mail does for you. Okay, second, Google.com. Do not use Google.com. Do not use Google.com. Okay, right now I use a search engine called StartPage. Start, the opposite of stop. Startpage.com. Start, which is the opposite of stop. Startpage.com. It gives you superb results, much, much better than DuckDuckGo, which is not even a real search engine. And the reason why StartPage gives you such great results is because they're pulling from Google's index. They're pulling from Google. That's why they give you superb results. And StartPage is free, and they do not track you. Now, because they don't track you, they're also not customizing your results, which I know my wife likes. She likes getting customized results. But just you have to get rid of that. You have to get rid of that in your life. So startpage.com or some other search engine that doesn't track. What about the browser? Do not use Chrome. Okay? Never, if you're using Chrome now, delete it from your computer so you're not even tempted to use it. There are plenty of other browsers around that are not so invasive, and Chrome is extremely invasive. Do not use Chrome. The best one right now, which is not even in my 7 Steps article, but it's the best right now, is called Brave. And I'm in a room with a lot of very brave people, so this should be easy for you to remember. Go to brave.com. It's a fairly new search engine. It not only doesn't track you, it suppresses all advertisements, even when you're using YouTube. All those crazy ads that are on top of the videos, it even suppresses those ads. It's really superb. That's what I've been using for several years. I have not received a targeted ad, ladies and gentlemen, since 2014. If you have an Android phone, don't throw it away. They're very expensive, but give it to charity. Give it to charity. In my article, in fact, I actually give the name of a military, a United States military charity that is looking for cell phones for warriors, wounded warriors, and so on. So give it to charity, preferably in another country. That would be even better. But the point is, don't use Android. I use a very secure phone, which happens to be a BlackBerry. The contents are encrypted. It uses what's called an NDA, so everything is routed through Mexico. I mean, okay, maybe that's overwhelming. Maybe you don't need to know all that. But the point is, don't use Android, okay? Don't use Android. iPhone is much more secure than Android. And there are alternatives. The point is, there are secure and private alternatives. There's a lot more that you can learn about how to protect yourself and your family. If you think that the inconvenience is too much for you, then you deserve what you're going to get. That's all I can say. And switching over involves just inconvenience, sometimes involves paying $6, $7 a month. We're not talking about major fees here, even where there are some fees. You must start to get this mindset. You must protect your privacy and the privacy of your loved ones. Ladies and gentlemen, okay, you've heard the expression, freedom isn't free, right? We have to fight for it. Well, there's another article of mine that you probably should look up, and it's called Free Isn't Freedom. And in that article, I explain that the more you give up of your personal life to these companies, the more you are losing your freedom. The more freedom you are giving up. You're giving them more control over your life and the lives of your children. Why would you do that? The work I do is scary, honestly. Reggie Littlejohn is here, I know, and the work she does is scary, and there's some real heroes in this room who do scary things. I become more and more concerned as I continue to do this research. All I can say is, if you've never heard of any of this, if this is an introduction, please don't forget me. Please don't forget what I've told you. Please pursue this. Please don't take the easy way and just keep using all the services you're using now. Don't do that. Put a little effort into it. Free isn't freedom. Thank you for your attention today. Thank you.
We've gone a little bit over time. In fact, we're 5 minutes over. But do you mind if we I'm going to ask 1 or 2 questions because I've got so many questions, and this is such an important topic. But we've got to be done in probably 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes. Okay, so I've tried to sort through these to go and find out, one of the ones that I thought would be, and you've already answered some of them. What is a safe cell phone to use?
Well, as I mentioned, iPhone is a little more safe than any Android phone. BlackBerry is more safe. Yes, they still exist. They have a model coming out in June, which I intend to buy, called the Key 3. The Key 3 will be one of the most secure phones in the world, and it will alert you when someone's trying to, get at the contents of your phone. But it keeps changing. It keeps changing, I should add. It keeps changing. Generally speaking, though, avoid Android. That's the main thing you want to do. There's some exceptions to that, by the way, but generally avoid Android. Samsung just uses, Google's Android. A lot of companies do. Try to avoid it.
And I guess you answered some of them with your 7 steps. So what we will do is put these articles that Robert just spoke about, we'll put them up onto our website and make sure that if you did not get the names of the articles, you'll be able to go to our website and you'll be able to pull them down.
Sure. Okay. And by the way, do check out thecreepyline.com or just go straight to iTunes or Amazon. Again, Amazon Prime is free to watch the film. I think even these other services, it's only $3 or $4. It is well worth watching. It's an extremely professionally done movie. It's got lots of people, lots of information. And again, if I'm the introduction, the creepy line is the next step.
I will tell you that Robert is here because I watched The Creepy Line. Tom Zawastowski, who's right here with the Portage Tea Party people, sent me the link, and both myself and Janine Jones watched it. And actually, she watched it on the Saturday, I think, and I watched it on the Sunday, and we called each other and said, we've got to get this guy to come in here and talk to everybody. It is really creepy. And the interesting thing about it is the creepy line is actually something that the head of Google calls it. He calls it a creepy line. He keeps saying we're not over the creepy line, but he knows that that's the creepy line. The other one was, what happens if you mask your IP address? Does this help?
Oh, yes. In fact, that's in the 7 Simple Steps article. Masking your IP address is extremely important to do. And, you know, when I first heard about that kind of thing, I was intimidated. Doesn't sound a little intimidating to mask your IP address? What you want to do, in other words, on your computer is you sign up for a VPN service or a proxy service. There are free ones. There are ones you pay for. The one I recommend right now, which I think because I pay for it by every 6 months chunks or something like that, I think maybe it's costing me $7-8 a month. But this is one of the top-of-the-line VPNs, and it's called Nord, N-O-R-D, NordVPN. And unfortunately, there are some bad ones there too. But if you sign up for one of these services, what they do is they have you install, very, very simple to do, they have you install a very simple app on your computer or your mobile device or your phone. So I have VPNs everywhere now. And you know, it hides you. So that when someone is trying to track you, which now thousands of companies are trying to do, they're all adopting the Google surveillance business model, it hides you, so they can't see you, and that's extremely important for you to do.
What about Yahoo? Is that a good one?
Oh, okay, what about Yahoo? You know, Yahoo has an email service, right? So does AOL. Yahoo has a search engine. Unfortunately, forget about Yahoo, because Yahoo used to be awesome. Now Yahoo gets most or all of its search results from Google. It's just an extension of Google. Yahoo is now owned by Verizon, and there are a number of articles that came out last year about this. Unfortunately, both Yahoo and AOL, which are owned by Verizon, are now being monetized. In other words, they've gone into their surveillance business. So if you use Yahoo email or AOL email, you are being monitored and monetized as aggressively as Google monitors and monetizes you. So Yahoo, forget it. I mean, really, this is serious. But there are alternatives. That's the good news. There are alternatives. And just takes a little bit of time, sometimes a little bit of money, but very small amounts. And you can have a different kind of internet experience. And there are also leaders, internet leaders, including Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the World Wide Web, who are actually trying to figure out ways to reinvent the whole internet, because obviously the way it has evolved is a threat to democracy. It's a threat to human freedom around the world. It's the most serious threat to democracy that democracy has ever faced in its history.
Thank you so much, Dr. Robert Epstein. Just unbelievable. Thank you.